In November 2023, the former Minister of National Economy of Kazakhstan, 44-year-old Kuandyk Bishimbayev, committed an unspeakable crime against his wife, 31-year-old Saltanat Nukanova. What happened behind closed doors was horrifying, but what made it even more chilling was his desperate attempt to cover his tracks and make the brutal act look like a tragic accident. This story will leave you speechless. Let's uncover the terrifying truth. This case has shaken an entire nation. The victim's family demanded a fully open trial, ensuring that millions of people in Kazakhstan and beyond are now watching closely. The question on everyone's mind is not whether the former minister is guilty. There is no doubt about that. The real mystery lies in his sentencing. Would his wealth and political connections once again shield him from true justice? A few years ago, Kuandyk Bishimbayev was convicted of repeatedly accepting massive bribes. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but walked free after serving only one. Many feared that history would repeat itself. To truly understand this case, we must go deeper, not only into the tragic relationship between Kuandyk and Saltanat, but also into the backgrounds of both individuals. What led to this horrifying event? Could it have been prevented? And why did Bishimbayev insist on a jury trial? So who is Kuandyk Bishimbayev? Born on April 11, 1980, in Kayserlorda, Kazakh SSR. He was the eldest of 2 children in a powerful and well-connected family. His father, a member of the Kazakh parliament, and his mother, Almira Nerlibayeva, a successful entrepreneur, ensured their son had every advantage. When Kuandyk was arrested for corruption, his mother defended him publicly, calling his initial 12-year sentence a destruction of his personality. Kuandyk's academic and professional career was impressive. He obtained 3 higher degrees, including studies at the Kazakh Academy of Management and George Washington University in the United States. By the age of 26, he had earned a PhD in economic sciences. His rise to power was swift, starting in banking before taking leadership roles in major companies. In 2016, he became the Minister of National Economy, making him one of the youngest high-ranking officials in Kazakhstan. But behind the polished resume and political prestige lurked something much darker. However, just 8 months later, Kuandyk Bishimbayev's political career came crashing down. A massive corruption scandal exposed his involvement in taking multiple bribes of staggering amounts. Sentenced to 10 years in prison, he shockingly served only 1 before being released on parole. He publicly apologized to then-President Nursultan Nazarbayev, and in a move that outraged many, he was pardoned. Kuandyk Bishimbayev's personal life. Before meeting his future victim, Bishimbayev had already been married twice. His first wife, Agoram Orlova, was a woman he married in 1999 while still a student. They had a son, Alexander Valikon, in 2000. However, the marriage ended in divorce by 2004. In 2006, now an advisor to the Minister of Economy, Bishimbayev married again. This time, his wife was Nasim Kamanbiev-Bergalova. Their marriage lasted 14 years and produced 3 children. But in 2020, the couple divorced, reportedly at Nazim's request. Then came Saltanat Nukanova. Who was Saltanat Nukanova? Born on May 15, 1992, in Pavlar, a northern city in Kazakhstan, Saltanat was the youngest of 2 children. Her father, businessman Amanjuldi Nukanov, and her mother, economist Shuma School, ensured their daughter had a bright future. Her uncle, Kara Nukanov, was a powerful figure in politics, heading regional departments and even governing multiple cities. From a young age, Saltanat was fascinated with astrology. What started as a childhood interest soon became her passion. She immersed herself in studying astrology, crafting horoscopes, and making natal charts for her friends. To everyone's surprise, many of her predictions came true. Determined to turn her passion into a career, Saltanat began offering astrological consultations online. Her popularity skyrocketed. Women and girls sought her advice on love, careers, and personal growth. Her clientele expanded rapidly, her services booked months in advance. By her mid-20s, she was financially independent, living her dream and thriving. In the spring of 2022, Kuandyk Bishimbayev stumbled across Saltanat's social media page. The young woman's beauty captivated him, and in a move that would change both of their lives forever, he messaged under the guise of booking an astrology consultation. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and this time what he wanted was Saltanat. However, Saltanat refused. She made it clear her services were exclusively for women, but instead of deterring him, her rejection only fueled his obsession. Bishimbayev was not a man used to hearing no. Determined to win her over, he flooded her with compliments, played on her empathy, and insisted that only she could help him. Only she could be trusted. Though flattered, Saltanat remained firm. She found his persistence unsettling, even irritating. Each time, she offered an online consultation instead. Each time, he refused. For months, Bishimbayev refused to back down. He dug deep into her life, uncovering where she lived, who she spent time with, and what she loved. He knew her routines, her passions, and her movements. Saltanat brushed it off as nothing more than an overzealous admirer, sharing the odd details with friends. But the pressure mounted. Finally, she relented. A single face-to-face consultation. When they met, Bishimbayev played the perfect gentleman, polite, charming, respectful. He did everything in his power to make a good impression. But for him, that first meeting was only the beginning. However, in a candid conversation with her brother, Saltanat was firm this man was not her type. It would never work. At first, neither she nor her family saw any real danger. Saltanat was strong, independent. No one could pressure her into something she did not want. They believed she could handle him. But within a month, everything changed. Bishimbayev found a crack in her defenses. He did not push her directly. Instead, he went through the heart of the family, the grandmother. He insisted on meeting her, claiming he wanted her blessing. If Saltanat ever changed her mind, he reasoned, he would have time to speak with her parents. But the grandmother, she might not be around much longer. Saltanat was deeply moved. Yet, even as emotions stirred, she remained resolute. She did not want a relationship with him. Then came the unexpected. In the fall of 2022, during a visit to her parents' home in Pavlodar, Saltanat spoke openly. Nothing had changed in her personal life, and she expected nothing too. She confided in her brother Bishimbayev was too old for her, their 12-year age gap unsettling. She felt no attraction toward him, and worst of all, according to her astrological calculations, they were completely incompatible. Less than a month after that visit, Ibik was scrolling through his social media feed when something stopped him cold. A post from his sister Saltanat announcing that Kuandyk had officially proposed, and she had gladly accepted. The family was stunned. No one had seen this coming. Her friends were just as shocked. She had told them not long ago that this man was not for her, that there was no future between them. Yet, by December 2022, just months after their first meeting, they were married. The wedding was extravagant, held in one of the most prestigious venues in Astana. But one detail stood out. Their marriage was not legally registered. They had only undergone a religious ceremony in a mosque, meaning they were civil spouses in the eyes of the law. Saltanat's feelings seemed to change overnight. She spoke endlessly about her husband, how intelligent, cultured, and well-spoken he was. She dismissed the corruption charges against him, insisting he had been framed and unjustly imprisoned. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. He showered her with gifts. She called him her golden husband and declared she would never regret her choice. Friends envied her happiness, but it did not last. The first warning sign. After the wedding, the couple moved in with Kuandyk parents. His mother, Almira, welcomed Saltanat warmly, treating her like a daughter, shielding her from housework, and offering gifts. But there was one thing she could not protect her from her son. At first, Saltanat's family had no idea what was happening. She and Kuandyk still visited them, though she never invited them to her home. It was clear Kuandyk did not like it. Then, less than a month after the wedding, on New Year's Eve, Ibik witnessed something chilling. A grand feast had been prepared, but only close family were invited. When Kuandyk's cousin and his wife arrived with gifts, Saltanat realized, to her embarrassment, that she had nothing in return. Thinking quickly, she grabbed a bottle of expensive perfume her husband had given her just the day before. It was still unopened. She had no idea what this simple act would unleash. But her act did not just displease. Kuandyk sent him into a blind rage. His face twisted with fury as he shouted at her, his voice shaking the room. How dare she give away something bought with his money? His words turned cruel, laced with venom. He insulted her, belittled her in front of everyone. The guests, sensing the storm, quickly excused themselves. Saltanat's parents, horrified, tried to defend their daughter-in-law, but Kuandyk silenced them with a chilling glare and harsh words. Then, in one violent motion, he flipped the entire table, sending plates, glasses, and food crashing to the floor. New Year's Eve was ruined. Ibik stood frozen, unable to process what he had just witnessed. This was not a simple argument. This was something far worse. The next day, in a hushed phone call, Saltanat admitted that her husband's behavior had changed drastically after the wedding. She had no idea why, but she clung to hope that it was just a phase, that things would get better. Her brother begged her to come home, to leave him before it was too late. Saltanat refused, the monster behind closed doors. 2 months later, Saltanat sent Ibik a series of selfies. Her face was battered, covered in deep purple bruises. Her expression was vacant. The message was simple. Do not ask me anything. Panic surged through Ibik. He called her, immediately no answer. He tried again, nothing. Desperate, he dialed Kuandyk instead. The ex-minister answered, his voice calm, eerily so. He suggested they meet in person, just the two of them. At the meeting, Kuandyk barely acknowledged the bruises. Instead, he smirked and told Ibik to mind his own business. When asked where Saltanat was, he had no answer. A sick feeling twisted in Ibik's gut. Something was terribly wrong, and he feared he was already too late. A prison disguised as love. Saltanat was found at her parents' country house, curled up in silence. She had the keys. She could have left at any time. Her family begged her to stay, pleaded with her to walk away before it was too late. But she refused. She told them she loved Kuandyk. She believed she could fix him. She was willing to endure anything to save their marriage. For a short while, Kuandyk played the perfect husband. He showered her with gifts, whispered promises of change, and swore he would never hurt her again. To prove his devotion, he took her on a dream vacation to the Maldives. The pictures from that trip showed a radiant couple, smiling against a backdrop of paradise. But when those same photos were later used in court, the truth was impossible to ignore. Beneath the sunlight and sand, bruises marked Saltanat's body. Dark fingerprints wrapped around her wrists, evidence of rough hands that had held her too tightly. After that trip, Saltanat never spoke of her suffering again. Not to Ibek, not to her parents. She smiled, but something had changed. She lost weight. She withdrew from the world. She stopped giving astrology consultations, stopped writing, stopped engaging with the thousands of followers who once admired her wisdom. She posted only pictures with her husband, telling the world how lucky she was, how deeply they loved each other. But it was all a lie. Kuandyk had stripped her of everything: her career, her independence, her voice. He controlled where she went, who she spoke to, even what she wore. She could not meet a friend without his permission. She could not sit in a cafe alone. Every call, every message on her phone was checked. To the world, they were the perfect couple. He played the role of a devoted husband, always by her side. And most people believed it. Only a few saw the truth. One night, in a rare moment of honesty, Saltanat confessed to a close friend. She told her about the control, the isolation, the accusations, the constant beatings. Her friend, horrified, urged her to run. Saltanat's response was chilling. She screamed. She told her friend she did not need advice. She only needed someone to listen. Still, she tried to save the marriage. They even went to a family psychologist. But some things are beyond saving. And for Saltanat, time was running out. A cage with no escape. Saltanat had agreed to couples therapy, hoping it would mend what was already broken. But Kuandyk refused every psychologist she chose, insisting on his own. The sessions were a nightmare. Instead of finding guidance, Saltanat was told that everything was her fault. Every bruise, every tear, she had brought it upon herself. The realization came like a cold slap. The psychologist had been bought, just another tool in Kuandyk's arsenal of control. She confided in Ibek, whispering her fears that the sessions were nothing but a calculated ploy to break her spirit further. By summer 2023, she had finally found the courage to leave. She packed her things and sought refuge at her parents' home. For a brief moment, she felt safe, but Kuandyk was never far behind. A week later, he arrived at her parents' doorstep, eyes pleading, voice soft. He begged for one last chance. He swore he would change, and Saltanat wanted to believe him. He promised a fresh start, a new home, his home, a change of scenery, he said, would make things better. And deep down, she clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, if they had a child, everything would finally fall into place. But the child never came, and nothing changed. By October, Saltanat knew she had to escape. This time, she would not hesitate. With Ibek's help, she secured a small apartment, her own space, a chance to reclaim her life. She had no idea that the next family dinner would be her last, a reunion masking a nightmare. Just 10 days after escaping, Saltanat stunned her family. Not only had she returned to Kuandyk, but she had also gone through the Muslim marriage rite with him again. It was as if every attempt to break free had been erased. On November 5th, she gathered her family, her parents, her brother, and a few close friends for dinner at a restaurant owned by Kuanysh's cousin, Bishimbayev. That night, Kuanysh played the perfect husband. He was charming, attentive, his every gesture dripping with affection. He spoke of love, of devotion, of protecting Saltanat, and cherishing her forever. His eyes never left her, and for the first time in a long while, everyone believed him. 4 days later, she was dead. The call that changed everything. On November 9th, Ibik returned home from work, unaware that his life was about to shatter. The phone rang. A relative's panicked voice broke through. Is it true? What they are writing on social media? Is it true? Confused, he asked what she meant. A moment later, a link appeared on his screen. His breath caught in his throat as he read the headline. Former Minister of Economy kills his young wife. His mind rejected it. This had to be a mistake, a cruel hoax. The day before, he had spoken to his sister. She had told him she was leaving her husband for good. She had even asked if she could stay at his place for the night. He had said yes, told her where to find the spare key, but she never arrived. And now, her phone was silent. The desperate search. Ibik's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel. His mind raced. His sister was not answering. Her husband had vanished. The house was empty. Panic tightened in his chest. There was only one place left to check: the restaurant where Saltanat had last been seen. As he sped through the streets, his phone rang again. His parents, their voices were laced with fear. They had seen the news. They begged him to tell them it was a mistake. He had no answers, only a promise. I will find out. But deep inside, dread was already settling in. The confirmation of a nightmare. The moment he arrived at the restaurant, the scene was worse than he imagined. Police officers swarmed the place. The flashing red and blue lights painted the building in an eerie glow. An officer approached him, his face grim. "We are sorry for your loss," he said. She was already gone before the medics arrived. Ibik felt the air leave his lungs. It had to be a mistake. His sister was strong. She had wanted to leave, to escape. How could this have happened? But the truth was undeniable. Saltanat was dead. A web of lies unraveled. By the time Ibik arrived, Kuandyk had already been arrested. He denied everything. It was an accident, he insisted. I tried to help her. His cousin, Bakitson, the restaurant's owner, was also taken into custody, suspected of being involved. At first, Kuandyk's lawyer fought back aggressively, claiming there was no proof. But then, a crucial revelation changed everything. The restaurant's security footage had been deleted inside and outside. Someone had tried to erase the truth. But forensic specialists recovered the footage, and what they found shocked everyone. A crime beyond comprehension. The investigation dragged on for 4 months. All the while, Kuandyk maintained his innocence, behaving as if he was untouchable, but the evidence told a different story. The charge against him was murder with particular cruelty. Forensic experts, hardened by years of experience, admitted they had never seen such extensive injuries. Some wounds were inflicted 6 to 8 hours before she died. Saltanat had suffered, and now the truth was coming to light. A night of horror. Saltanat's final hours were filled with unimaginable suffering. Forensic experts confirmed she was beaten relentlessly, her face and body covered in bruises, leaving almost no unharmed skin. The brutality of the assault shocked even the most experienced investigators. But Kuandyk's lawyers fought hard to twist the truth. They claimed she did it to herself, that she was drunk, stumbling, falling against the tiles, the furniture, that every wound, every mark on her body was a result of her own actions. But the evidence told another story. The last fight. On the evening of November 8, 2023, Saltanat and Kuandyk attended a concert with friends. Singer Dima Bilan's music filled the venue, drowning out conversations. But something was wrong. Saltanat and her husband were arguing not just a disagreement, but something deeper, something dangerous. Friends noticed too late. By the time they realized it was serious, the couple had already left without a word. Their next stop, the restaurant owned by Kuandyk's cousin. There, Behind the closed doors of a VIP booth, the fight escalated. Security footage shows Kuandyk grabbing several bottles of alcohol from the bar before isolating himself with his wife. Witnesses say their argument grew louder. Saltanat had finally made her decision. "This cannot go on," she told him. "I am leaving." Saltanat had heard enough. She called her brother, voice trembling. "I am coming over," she said. "It is over." At midnight, she stepped outside, ready to leave for good. But Kuandyk followed. For 15 minutes, surveillance cameras captured their final argument outside the restaurant. Saltanat tried to stay calm, keep her distance, but he would not let her go. Then, something changed. Kuandyk convinced her to step back inside for just a few minutes. But that was all he needed. In the hallway, he grabbed her hands, shook her, pushed her against the wall. In court, his lawyer had the audacity to call this stroking. Saltanat knew she was in danger. She did the only thing she could. She ran. She locked herself in the bathroom, her last attempt to escape. But she would never make it out alive. He began kicking the door, pounding it with brute force. The impact left dents, evidence of his uncontrollable rage. With nowhere to run, Saltanat had no choice but to open the door. The moment she did, he struck her. Blow after blow, his fists crashed into her face. He accused her of being ungrateful, of living off his money, of taking everything from him. His voice was filled with venom, his words cutting deeper than his fists. What happened next remains uncertain. Kuandyk claimed that, in a fit of rage, Saltanat tore off her clothes and jewelry, flushing them down the toilet to prove she needed nothing from him. But there was another, far more sinister version. Some believe he forced her to strip to humiliate her, to break her spirit one last time. When her gold jewelry vanished down the drain, Kuandyk exploded. He punched her face again and again. Then, with one final, violent shove, he sent her crashing into the toilet. At trial, he had the audacity to claim she was drunk, that she fell on her own, striking her head against the tiles. But the truth was far darker. The night of torture. Instead of leaving, he refused to call a cab. He said he was ashamed of his wife, humiliated by the sight of her in only a coat over her underwear. They returned to the VIP booth, where the nightmare continued. Around 7 a.m., Saltanat made one last attempt to escape. She stopped at the mirror. She saw her broken face staring back at her. That was when Kuandyk snapped completely. What started as forceful shoving turned into a brutal beating. He punched, he kicked, he dragged her by the hair across the floor. Then, he hauled her back into the VIP booth. There, behind closed doors, he finished what he started. But in court, he swore he never touched her. He said she fell on her own, hitting the floor and furniture. Then, as Saltanat lay motionless, battered and broken, he did something unbelievable. He did not call an ambulance. Instead, he called a fortune teller. He wanted to know if his wife was going to be okay. The fortune teller assured him, Saltanat was just drunk. She only needed to sleep. Satisfied, Kuandyk left her there. By morning, she was gone forever. Kuandyk claimed he heard snoring and assumed Saltanat was asleep. But it was not snoring. It was a death rattle, the final, harrowing sound of a person slipping away. By noon, he finally noticed the truth. Saltanat was not breathing. Panic set in. Instead of calling for help, he dialed his brother, Bakon Bishimbayev, and ordered him to come immediately. Together, they cleared out the staff, locked the restaurant, and deleted the CCTV footage, desperate to erase any trace of what had happened. At trial, Bacon insisted he believed his brother's story that Saltanat was simply drunk and asleep. He said he deleted the footage to protect her dignity, claiming it showed her in a disgraceful state, dishonoring her family. But the truth was undeniable. Saltanat had been dead for hours. Yet an ambulance was not called until evening, when her body was already cold, stiff with rigor mortis. Only then did Bishimbayev claim he tried resuscitation, but it was far too late. Saltanat was long gone. Law enforcement arrived, and both brothers were arrested on the spot. The ex-wife's silence as the investigation unfolded. Another name surfaced. Nazim Karman Baba Galova, Kuandyk, former wife and the mother of his 3 children. Years ago, when Kuandyk was arrested in a corruption case, Nazim stood by his side. But as soon as he was released, she filed for divorce. She cited irreconcilable differences, but those who knew her suspected there was more to the story. Had she endured the same horrors? Had she escaped just in time? As the trial loomed, people wondered, what did she truly know? After her ex-husband was charged with the brutal murder of his new wife, Nazim Karman Baba Galova finally broke her silence. In a shocking interview, she admitted Kuandyk was fully capable of such a crime. For 14 years, she had been married to him, but in 2011, after the birth of their second child, everything changed. He became aggressive, controlling, and narcissistic. Convinced that the world revolved around him, his opinions were absolute, his word, law. He cheated openly, making no effort to hide his affairs. But it was not until his 2017 arrest for corruption that she realized the true extent of his betrayals. When authorities accessed his phone, the truth unraveled. There were multiple mistresses, constantly replaced like disposable objects. Then came his pardon, his release, and with it, he grew even more violent. One night, a petty argument exploded into pure rage. Without hesitation, Kuandyk ripped a toilet lid off with his bare hands, hurled it at Nazim. She barely had time to react. That was the moment she understood she stayed. She would not survive. The breaking point. Nazim dodged the flying toilet lid just in time. At that moment, she knew her marriage was over. She now understood why Kuandyk had never laid a hand on her. He knew she would not tolerate it. But with his mistresses, he allowed his true nature to surface, humiliating, controlling, and breaking them. And Saltanat, Nazim was certain her ex-husband had chosen her deliberately. He tested how far she would bend, how much pain she would endure. And when he saw she would not fight back, would not leave, would not expose him, he let his demons loose. The trial begins. In March 2024, the murder trial started. Saltanat's family demanded transparency. They wanted the whole world to see what happened, fearing Kuandyk would buy his way out. But he had a different strategy. He insisted on a jury trial, knowing it could save him from a life sentence. 12 jurors were chosen, 10 main, 2 alternates. The goal was clear: avoid the maximum punishment, because this time there would be no parole, no second chance. If convicted, he would never walk free again. A desperate gamble. A jury trial offered Kuandyk his only hope. For a death sentence, every juror and the judge had to vote against him, a rare outcome. So he clung to that chance. In court, Kuandyk denied everything. He swore it was not premeditated murder, but a tragic accident, a moment of rage, bad luck, and misunderstandings. He claimed Saltanat provoked him, insulted him, even attacked him first. But the recovered surveillance footage told a different story. It showed the cold, methodical violence, the relentless beatings, the hours of suffering before death. A system that fails victims. At first, prosecutors considered charging him under domestic violence laws, shockingly lenient crime in Kazakhstan. Saltanat's mother wept in court, saying she never got to see her daughter's face one last time. The injuries were too horrific. And yet, the law could let her murderer walk free. Public outrage erupted. In April 2024, Kazakhstan toughened penalties for domestic violence, but Kuandyk was not done scheming. He pressured his own brother, demanding false testimony to cover his tracks. Because for him, there was only one thing that mattered: getting away with it, twisting the truth. But Bishimbayev had enough. He begged the court to protect him from Kuandyk's influence. The request was granted. Stripped of an ally, Kuandyk brought back the only way he knew, by destroying Saltanat's name. In court, he called her unstable, an alcoholic, a cheater. He claimed he barely touched her, just a few slaps in anger. The bruises, self-inflicted from falling down drunk. The handprints on her throat, that was him trying to save her. But Bishimbayev broke his silence. He revealed that Kuandyk never wanted to call for help. His only concern, erasing the evidence. Bishimbayev said Kuandyk forced him to delete the footage, then ordered him to take Saltanat's phone home. A twisted plan to fake her geolocation, making it seem like she had returned to their apartment, because he knew her brother was tracking her movements. At the 9th hearing, Kuandyk and his lawyer made a last-ditch move. They accused Judge Kuandyk of bias and demanded she be removed from the case. A clear sign he knew time was running out. The verdict: justice or injustice. Kuandyk's desperate attempt to remove Judge Kuandyk failed. She remained on the case until the very end. On May 13, 2024, the verdict was delivered. A sentence that didn't satisfy. Kuandyk was found guilty of grievous bodily harm, torture, and murder. His punishment: 20 years for murder, 7 years for battery and torture. Sentence partially combined: 24 years behind bars. His accomplice, Bishimbayev, received 4 years for aiding in the cover-up. The court considered that Bishimbayev had no prior record, had repented, and cooperated fully with the investigation. Saltanat's father, Nenov, was furious. He wanted a life sentence, calling any lesser punishment an injustice. Her brother Ibik had a different view. For a 44-year-old man, he said, 24 years was as good as life. More shocking stories ahead. This case may have ended, but justice is not always served. There are many more chilling stories to tell, so subscribe the channel and stay tuned.